Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Mary Pat Higgins. I'm the president and CEO of the Dallas Holocaust and Human Rights Museum, and I'd like to thank you all so much for joining today's program in the Barrios, Early Mexican American Education in Dallas. Today's program is presented in conjunction with the Candy Brown Holocaust and Human Rights Educator Series, and I'd like to give a special thank you to the generous supporters of that series, Candy and Ike Brown. It's a multi-pronged program that happens throughout the year. And I'd also like to give a warm welcome to the educators who are here in attendance for that series today. Thank you all so much for your commitment to educating our students and helping shape our future leaders. And thank you for spending a day with us during your summer. Please raise your hand so we can all thank you for what you do for our community. And thank you to the State Fair of Texas and Education Service Center Region 10 and 11 for their participation in support of our teachers. And I'd also like to thank the Summerly Foundation for sponsoring today's program. Thanks to your support, the museum is able to host programs like this about important but often overlooked periods in Texas history. And as always, I'd like to thank our community partners for today's program. Dallas After School, Dallas Mexican American Historical League, Reading Partners North Texas, and Southwest Jewish Congress. Thank you so much for partnering with us. We're honored today to hear from Dr. Macario Hernandez. He serves as the president at Dallas College Mountain View campus, beginning this role in June. Previously, he was the first ever chief of staff at UNT Dallas for the last 2 years. Dr. Hernandez has served as a bilingual teacher, school administrator, and community leader for more than 25 years in Dallas, with most of his tenure spent in his hometown neighborhood of Oak Cliff. Dr. Hernandez serves as a board member of the National Latino Education Research and Policy Project and past local president of the League of United Latin American Citizens, or LULAC. He holds a bachelor's degree from the University of North Texas, a master's degree from Texas Women's University, and a PhD from the University of Texas at Austin. At the end of today's presentation, we'll have time for questions, and hopefully you have received a note card as you entered. Please write your questions on that note card, and our staff will come around to collect them, and we'll answer as many questions as possible. If you're joining us virtually, please use the Q&A feature at the bottom of the screen and type in your questions, and we'll get to those too. And lastly, for those of you joining us in person, I'd like for you to take a minute and silence your cell phones so we can all enjoy this program without distractions. Now, it is my pleasure to welcome Dr. Hernandez to the stage.
Thank you so much. We appreciate you hosting this conversation. I think it's a very important one. My name is Macario Hernandez. I currently I'm in my third or fourth week as the president of Mountain View campus, Dallas College. And so just to say the importance of, thank you guys. Throughout this speech, I'm going to be talking about this kind of investing, not only looking at ourselves locally, but also historically, how important it is to preserve our history. And I'm also going to be talking about I want you to reflect throughout this conversation about your own history and your own household and how important your stories are. And I'm going to be advocating for you to, if you haven't recorded your grandmother, great-grandmother, great-grandfather, or your parents, and you haven't started recording their stories, it's important that we think about that, because those histories are going to go if we don't preserve them. And I think that's very important for us to continue this work. And what better place than at the Holocaust Museum, where we're preserving something, a part of history that we can never forget. So I will share, 30 years ago, I was a student at Mountain View. And exactly 30 years ago, in 1994, confused, graduated from Sunset High School in Oak Cliff, didn't know where to go, didn't know what to do, looking for registration. To serve as a role as president just kind of, it emphasized the importance of us investing locally and the importance of our generation of students to remember to come back to make a difference in their communities. So you're going to hear a little bit of that. So I do want to give a shout out to Priscilla, who really helped put a lot of this presentation. The president of the MAH, the Dallas Mexican American Historical League, who collaborates with other leagues that preserve history, OGAD also, the other organizations that really try to preserve our history, which is very important. And I'm going to be using that theme throughout this. A lot of this is content-based, and I'm super excited we have teachers in the crowd because I spent 23 years in K-12, so I know real clearly for my teaching. Thank you. Yeah, higher ed is still new to me, but I'll tell you that I think it's real important for us to connect all that, right? All the way to K-15, pre-K-15. It's important for us to make that connection. So please, teachers, because I've worked with teachers for so many years, if you raise your hand, I will stop the presentation and literally to answer your question at that moment, okay? Because I'm more about engaging the crowd than one of these long solo presentations. So please, I'm open to two-way conversations. There's something that really activates the question. I bend rules a little bit, so just roll with me. This is the way I grew up. But to think about it, I think about my father. So I want to give a little credibility of why am I the one giving the presentation about Little Mexico or the Barrios in Little Mexico, is because that's my grandfather and that's my grandmother. My great-grandfather is in a historical grave site in Carrollton, Farmers Branch. He passed in 1925. He came here in 1900. So there's a story behind that. We won't get into that when I did a presentation at the State Fair about the Hernandez family. But I wanted to start that with me because I want to talk about this intergenerational consciousness. Now, that's some of my research. But I want us to think about everybody else in this room. We all come from something. Who we are today and how we present ourselves comes from who raised us. And those are all historical moments. When we talk to our families and get interviews from our parents and our grandparents, it's important that we preserve that history. But I seen this picture, and they came from León, Guanajuato, and my grandfather from Veracruz, Mexico. And this is, and they had an age difference of 22, a little different back in the days, you know what I'm saying? But, we think about, we're having, when we talk about the Barrios de Mexico, we sometimes think, we have this misconception that, yes, there was a lot of this, there was not running water, there was a lot of this, but this is my grandfather was a Mason. That's a Mason wedding. That's their wedding right here in Dallas. So just imagine, that's literally probably 0.3 miles from where we're standing today. That was occurred real close to here. Now, you're probably thinking we're like at some park having a wedding and there's like a piñata. No, it's absolutely nothing like that. I mean, I don't even think I could afford that wedding today. You know what I'm saying? So what I'm trying to tell you is that we have to start changing the mindsets of this kind of deficit thinking. We need to think positively. There's so much wealth in our Latino culture that we have to also begin to look at the bright parts and how much wealth and how much history we bring and what we've done to transform our society and our communities. That's their wedding. That's Sam. And so this is their Nana stories. I'll go and share with the crowd. Like I said, we're going to be vulnerable out here. So I worked in that store ever since I was 5 or 6 years old. I actually, through difference, I actually paid to college using the meat saw. I did donate a piece of my finger in that actual store, the Hernandez store. But imagine, we had our own, there's our delivery trucks, Hernandez Grocery Market. We're right there. This is exactly behind El Phoenix. So that parking lot, I can barely go down that street in Alamo without getting emotional because the history now is a parking lot. My grandma in 2009, who passed away, I will still say it out loud here, until somebody can say otherwise. I would say she would be one of the last living people in downtown Dallas. There was high rises around her house. She was right behind El Phoenix. She was still boiling her egg there at 93, 94 years old. She would not leave that house. We tried every which way. It's not going to happen. She loved the city noise. And so in my presentation on my history, there'll be different pictures about it. But today we're going to talk about all different parts of Dallas. But I want to share that, and that might be just trying to get some street cred for why am I giving this presentation, you know what I'm saying? So I worked at that store, and that's my grandmother. That's actually my father right there, and that little thing is what their word is. We're kind of debating that. The brothers are fighting that one, but we'll figure that out. In those days, the banks didn't hear that. My grandfather actually was part of starting the first Mexican Chamber of Commerce, which really, because banks weren't giving, talking about trying to preserve. So they had to get organized and get together this kind of provides an economical infrastructure for us to actually do something. And it all relates to education. I'm going to get to that. So that's my grandfather, and he stood for three things. This is part of my research: trabajo, justicia, and progreso. So it's basically hard work, justice, and progress. And so you think about those kind of themes, and we talked about through it. Again, I'm going to move away from this and go into the bigger picture, but I just want to share a little bit about my own history so you kind of understand that my dad used to play right where we're at the Holocaust. It was kind of a track, a railroad track. They would play out here with slingshots. There's a lot of rats in downtown, man. They probably still are, you know what I'm saying? But that was what they did for fun. So we're actually standing real close to this, and through this presentation, you'll see how close we are. This actually, we're right where this museum is really a big part of some of the Mexican community that came in after the Mexican Revolution. As you can tell, as we look through this, as we think about how it started, some of the census data, it's we don't know how accurate it is even once today, right? But what we want to share today is just this deep history of the Mexican American community and the impact it had on Dallas and the surrounding areas. Like I said, my great-grandfather's in Carrollton Farms Branch. It was a Hernandez farm we found through the data collection. But they started here in downtown Dallas, right here where we're at, was basically the Mexican-American community when they first came after the Mexican Revolution. So you can see, I won't read all the slides, but I do want you're more than welcome to continue looking at. The first known record person was Lucio Balmares in 1859. Now, that's kind of debatable, right? Because this was Mexico at some point, right? We don't want to go too deep in history because there's probably going to be some debates on that one. It's almost like, we're not going to get into all that. Then we're going to get me to start talking about who discovered America, right? I got in trouble in high school for debating that one. That's in my dissertation if y'all want to see the story. But so we're going to look at different areas here. So this is kind of an old map, kind of from 1900 to the 1970s. It kind of gives you an idea of these different areas. And there's a lot of people, from different, even as I look at see Albert over there, I see you out there. Oh, hey, Dr. Lombardi, that's my mentee. But I would tell you that these areas, there's people in the crowd right now that grew up in some of these areas where it's La Bajada, if you can see right there, Little Mexico is where that was like the heart of it, but we were actually all different parts of Dallas, cement cities, a lot of amazing stories. You can literally do a presentation on every single one of these areas, and because there's so much history, so much deep history in some of this, in all this. So you can see kind of, but you also see something really incredible if you really want to look at it critically. It also kind of shows where most of the gentrification happened in the past and where it's happening today. So you can imagine even today how it's connected to what's happening today. We all love to go to, people who love to go to Trinity Grove. Well, that actually, you can see all this where it comes down through the middle. And, Arcadia Park, I had some of my best friends there for that. That one might be the only one that may not be gentrified anytime soon because I got my kid goes to school there. But I will tell you, we're kind of, all these areas, you can start seeing historically what it does, and this is where a lot of the schools were at. So, of course, this is actually an ordinance, City of Dallas. We really were intentional about, it was in the law that they had in 1916 that the City of Dallas, they had control. They actually had segregated blocks. And this is huge because, so this area right here was, where we're at was predominantly the Mexican neighborhood. And then to a little bit more down going to the west as you get closer down Deep Ellum, the African-American neighborhood. A lot of people don't understand like the history that was there with even music. How many of you know the song Wooly Bully? Okay, they actually competed against the Beatles, believe it, at one point. But that was because my father knew the fans. They were playing in the garage, but they collaborated actually with the African-American community when they met tribes, and that's how they learned the music together, and there's a lot of history behind that. So you hear about songs like Wooly Bully and Sam the Sham and all those individuals. Some of the individuals came from Little Mexico. They came from right here. Anybody seen, there's so much history, so deep. Anybody seen the movie Chinatown or Scarface? Okay, we all know. Anybody from the hood knows that one. But what I'm telling you is that the cinematographer for those movies, and Chinatown being one of the top 5 movies of all time, depends if you want to debate it, well, the cinematographer was right there from Little Mexico. So we talk about history that's happening right here in Little Mexico. He's moved to Beverly Hills and did his thing, but there's so much deep history thinking about competing with blockbusters from the Beatles all the way to, John Alonso, who was a cinematographer, like some of the schools worked real closely with Jack Nicholson, to Lee Trevino, probably the greatest golf player that we ever had for Latinos coming out of this same neighborhood. So there's so much history here that again, that'll be an entire different presentation because we're focusing on education today. But these type of laws are the ones that kept us. Even through that, we still kept through it. Dallas ISD did some research and actually did this and printed out. Justin Kimball, who's named after the high school down there, that's the closest high school to my house right now, and there he wrote this and kind of gave, which was very important that this publication was done because it kind of opened the eyes to some of what was happening. We talked, we've seen this before. We've seen the signs of no Mexicans allowed, and no Mexicans or dogs, right? And they would even use that one if you haven't seen that. And so some of those things you can imagine, while it almost came to a point where there were segregated schools, but some of the Mexicans didn't know even where to end up. A lot of them didn't have a school to go to at some point because the segregation was just kind of focused on particular areas. And we talk about the legal battles. A lot of people don't know this, but some of the precedents. This was the Mendez versus Minister is so important because this actually was 7 years before Brown versus the Board of Education. And that's real important for you to understand because like anybody who understands legal cases, if you don't have any precedents, then it doesn't really help you in court. So these cases were used as precedents for the Brown versus Board of Education. So that's why this is so important because they were able to go reference this particular case that really didn't, where the superintendent, literally said, and I'm going to read this one, people of Mexican descent were intellectually, culturally, and morally inferior to Europeans. And so that's when the attorney, which we still haven't been able to pull this off, that he said that as a thing that Mexican was a race, right? And so this was used for the Board of Education as a precedent, even though, even today we're still, if we have anybody born, we're still, considered to be Caucasian based on the thing. It still hasn't been classified as a race, but that's understandable right now. This is just historical data that helped us get to separate but equal. So again, 7 years before the Board of Education, these are the things that help us support and where we're at today in education. These are just other cases that occurred. This kind of just tells you more about history. We don't look about, right now we're really in a movement on mental health. So you think about a child, and one of the cases has to do with speaking English when you can't speak Spanish in a certain school, right? Just think about a kindergarten kid who needs to go to the restroom, right? And they raise their hand. Or they don't want to raise their hand because they can't ask in English or something. So that affects them. It's not only going to affect them not only in their educational data, but it's also going to affect them, emotionally, psychologically, and it creates kind of you begin to build serious insecurities at a very young age. You're already building that in. It becomes real. That can really impact you in your future and how you're going to go. So this is just beyond education, just the lack of access to some of the schools. So we can talk about here, it goes back to the neighborhoods and talking about, what we're talking about. But I want you to know as we go through this conversation, as we're talking about the establishment of these segregated medicine schools, there's pros and cons, I think Henry Gates in his memoir talks about, was segregation, how bad was segregation? Because, the food, at the cookouts of the carne asadas are pretty good, and so is it at the barbecue. There was this debate about there's disadvantages of segregation, and we can have a debate about segregation, integration, what's happening, how it looks like today, but there's some pros and cons to it, right? Because you would think that just because, if you think about Black Wall Street, I make a correlation to Black Wall Street to kind of what happened here in Little Mexico because we had their own theaters in Spanish and we had to create something, right? If we don't have access to what exists, we create it ourselves. So some of those things are actually real powerful because it shows the power of coming together as a community and the wealth and how we can still build economic infrastructure to support each other to survive in some of the most difficult times in history. So these segregated schools, Dasmore and you just talk about it, provided some examples of some of this work, an extension of, but self-segregating because we're like, yeah, we're good. We're going to hang out with the same homies. We're all right. It's not the end of the day. And, you could see some of that. There is some unity involved in some of that. But I would talk to you, St. Anne's was pivotal in some of this work. Majority of Latinos were, and Mexican Americans or Mexicans that were coming here were, of course, came from the Catholic. I also Catholic. We're that was a big piece. That school was huge because it really created a safe haven for a lot of the families and students, and it was historical, and it's still here today. I think it might be a restaurant or something, but I haven't been back. I have a hard time sometimes going back, but I'm gonna get back to some of this stuff. I get a little emotional when I go back to certain parts of New Mexico because there's not there. Even El Phoenix, and El Phoenix is unfortunately it's still there, but we just don't know how long it's gonna be there, to be honest. So y'all should really take advantage of that because nothing there is no longer Mexican owned. So at any point, it can be, it can transform from one day to the next. So y'all got to keep going to those Wednesday specials for it to stay there. But the enchilada, somebody already said it. There's a picture taken by Priscilla, our president. It's a great picture. It just kind of talks about the history of St. Anne's and the importance of kind of created, it really, the diocese did sell the building in 1999, but we do have it a historical marker. I tried to convince my grandmother to make her house a historical marker, but she wasn't feeling it. She goes, it was complicated, but it's so important for us to preserve that history. I'm glad the Luna family in that area, which is around the corner, El Phoenix is not a historical marker. Doesn't mean it can't be. It would be nice, right? But we can do, I think we have representatives trying to do the Mexican American Museum of Texas up here. I see you over there. Wouldn't that be a good spot, El Phoenix, I mean, transform it into that. But the historical marker is important because if you look at Luna's across the street from that area by El Phoenix, that one is a historical marker. So y'all gone to the restaurant Mesa, I believe, Maya, sorry, but that can never be torn down or anything because it's been protected. That's the importance of the same thing with St. Anne's. It's also protected as a landmark. I think we have to do more of that. I think we also, look what happened just within this week, right? The First Baptist, that just, that hurts. That hurts at different levels, especially as we're trying to preserve. They actually helped us with the first Mexican Baptist church here in Dallas. So they were a big part of supporting the Mexicans in developing their church. So to see that, burn, it hurts a lot because we lose history. That's why I tell y'all today, please understand, and I'm not doing a presentation on my research, but please, please, please think about oral histories. And as an autoethnographer, please preserve them because it's not only landmarks, but it's also the stories that your parents have, the stories you have, and that your kids got to hear because that's where it gets intergenerational and it's always going to be saved because everybody in this room has a story. Your grandparents have a story, so do your parents, but you're shaped and how you think and how you view your life, whether you want to believe it or not, is shaped based on who raised you and who raised them. And it's important for you to kind of look at what parts of history matter and connect to how your kids are going to be shaped. I just really think that we're all kind of a part of we're a vehicle to save history and keep history together. And it's important that we do that, especially with all the technology we have today. We really should be recording a lot of these histories. And I'm going to be saying that throughout this presentation. And as teachers, you actually have, a great opportunity. You have a lot of agency where you can open it up to students. I know there's debates on what's happening. There's debates on what's happening right now, but I would tell you, stay within the law because you have to respect the laws that exist. But remember, our state has opportunities like Mexican American Studies, African American Studies. Those things actually exist and they're approved by the state. So just, if you see an opportunity, I think it's important that you respect staying within the TEKs, they still exist. And, but also understanding that we also need to know what's best and our kids need to know what they can bring to the table. So this is just going to show how close we are to this. This is from the Holocaust Museum, as you can tell. All of this is so much like less than 2 miles away. We're actually sitting in the middle of Little Mexico. We have famous people coming as alumni from, Anita Martinez, you also in West Dallas. She's an alumni of St. Anne's, and, she still plays a big role. They're actually coming to our campus at Mountain View to practice in the evenings in August. So it's all full circle. It's important that we do that because all this art and celebrating what we have. Cumberland Hill was another school that was also a reference point. They seen this more as a melting pot because it's more integrated. So again, I'm not going to get into too much of the details of this because I do love to get to Q&As as soon as possible. Rene Martinez was a graduate. If anybody knows Rene, he was a big advocate for, even he was part of the Santos Rodriguez. Anybody who doesn't know that story, it's a really sad story, and you'll see a picture of him later of, as a 12-year-old kid, he activated the Mexican-American activism in this entire city. We had a, 12-year-old kid who was shot by a police officer, dad's police officer. Police officer didn't serve much time for that, but what it did is it activated they were playing, he was doing Russian roulette. It's really a gruesome scene. I still stay in contact with the Santos family. They're a great family. The brother, he was their president. You can see the impact. These are things that are real serious and has, many, it affects people in a really bad way. So I would tell you, we have historical markers now for Santos. We have a small statue at Pikes Park, so there's things that are happening for us to tell this story. But it activated the activism in here in the city of Dallas. We're kind of a quiet community where they woke up a giant when that incident occurred. So again, this just talks about the melting pot, and how close all these schools are here to us. Crozier Tech, that's where my father went to school at, and then we got a couple of alumni here. We got Albert in the back over there, and so, I didn't show him. There's my daughter back there too, Isabel Hernandez. I see her. She's here to my son at home, Macario Hernandez. I always bring him up in my speech. It's part of that intergenerational connection. But this is important. So my father being there, it was also where not all Latino. Everyone thought that all Mexicans went to that school, but they actually were mixed to different areas. Some went to North Dallas, some went to different areas. So we do got to break that myth up. But guys, we had some pretty powerful athletes there. I mean, this is probably one of the most famous high schools that we had here in the South. It would have been, my dad has his Wolves yearbook at home. He was in the to see real funny pictures. This is so important. One of the biggest alumni was Pancho Medrano. Now, he didn't finish graduating there because, of course, he couldn't buy clothes to even go to school, and so he never returned. But that activated Pancho Medrano to do something different. Anybody know the Pikes Park? There used to be a swimming pool. The Mexicans could swim before the regular residents can go in. So they had to swim kind of in the dirty water of the pool before it was clean before, and Pancho fought to change that. That was a big activation in Pikes Park. But Pancho, you can see him there with Cesar Chavez. Without education, he fought for education. Just imagine that. I mean, there's family members. There's a school named after him here at the middle school. I mean, there's family that has an impact. The Medrano family, if you know, have been sitting in different parts of the city. There's a deep history there. But these are the people that are coming out of the Mexican communities and advocated for those individuals. Anybody who knows, Mexican Americans played a huge role. My father was also in the Army. He's married at the National Cemetery right by Mountain View. And so I will tell you, we have a deep history, as veterans. I mean, there's a very, very deep history that you can see at the state of Texas. There's an entire museum on its second floor, the Women's Museum, that you should really visit. But it talks about, just these amazing alumni that would come through. And again, Crozier Tech right here, real close, right by the art district. North Dallas High School, these are the schools that kind of preserves that some of the schools that also were there, so still here today. And just to imagine the amount of people that went and worked and fought for our country, and they still didn't have rights. And so you can imagine how difficult that was for them. I think someone named, it's real similar to my name, Macario Garcia, who started that down in South Texas. They wouldn't serve him. He actually fought the case. And we're talking about someone with a Purple Heart. I mean, this is serious. So those things make impacts. But the Cement City School, I think we probably have some people that's West Dallas. Anybody knows that? I kind of wish some of these school names still existed because, especially, they kind of have a nice little history to it, and it talks about it. Maybe we can in the future create some historical markers if they're not already there yet, that we can try to preserve some of that. Escuela Mexicana, there it goes. And these are the schools that we had. I'm going to tell you that in those times, we didn't have, over 50% of the people didn't have plumbing or running water. But it talks about also the resilience in education, that it wasn't always the physical structures. It was actually just all our families really believe in our kids getting the best education. And we still see that today in the Latino culture. And so we talk about this graduation, Edison, out there in West Dallas, and some of that, now it's no longer school, but it's for CTE projects. Benito Juarez is the one I really want to rename. We got to get that one back. That's huge. This is probably one of the most historical schools for the Mexicans in this particular area. And what better name than Benito Juarez? I mean, it's an amazing history. The conditions were they were tough. But again, education, just like today, even for our immigrants that are coming in today, education is still priority. Some of the most valedictorians that are coming out in this community are immigrant families that are coming through. It just shows the commitment and dedication they have and what they could bring to our community. I mean, they're real serious about their education. And we got to move away from this deficit thinking that nobody wants. It's not that we want the same as everybody else. We want the very best quality education for our kids, and we're going to do everything we can to do it. No matter what conditions we're in, they're still going to try to work hard to get it. So, again, you look at this. The principal, this is one of the students at Joe Ponce. Again, he was given a Purple Heart for his service in World War II. He earned his bachelor's. I mean, these are students coming out of the Benito Juarez. I mean, think about the kind of students. Eagle Ford School, I mean, there's another deep history there off of Chalk Hill that's getting developed now, a lot different. Arcadia Park, I grew up there, but a lot of my friends grew up there. And so right here you can see, again, this is, y'all starting to see something here that's a pattern, just kind of, not the location only from where we're at, but sort of the current kind of gentrification that's happening today. William B. Travis, it's kind of an inside story behind this one. That it was burnt because it was so bad. They wanted a new school, and it's almost like it was a community effort. But that's what people who grew up in the hood over there in that area. And believe me, my father knew some of them. I don't know how true that story is, but I will tell you that because the school was burnt, nobody got hurt. They did rebuild one that was in much better conditions. That was much better, and that's where it is today. And so. And so, again, this is all near here. And there's a picture of Santos Rodriguez, which I talked about being kind of the activation. The murder by him, by that police officer, really activated our community and woke them up and changed the game of how we get involved civically and also politically and also advocate even for education. So it's sad when Seattle, Washington had a park named after him. I mean, 20, 30 years before we even had anything here. That just kind of tells you how far we have to go historically here in Dallas to really connect to some of the histories of the past so that we can really preserve them and tell the story that's important for to be shared. So again, William, I don't know, that's kind of a backwards slide, but this is his birth certificate, or that was the report. And of course, the protest, this Rene Martinez there in the middle. This really, my grandfather and my father were there. So it kind of talks about why do I get involved in some of the work that I do and why did I get passionate about education. All that's kind of full circle. That's what we talk about. It's important for us to share our history with our own kids, and it becomes intergenerational. It's very important that we continue to have that consciousness. Of course, Adelfa Callejo, who also, she didn't even attend here in Dallas. She was, but probably one of the most significant Mexican Americans in this area because she was one of the first Latinos to do it. There's a statue right in front of UNT Dallas' law school, right there. And I was chief of staff. We were hoping to do something there to kind of celebrate. They've done it before. But it's just a great example. My father grew up with her, and they had a great relationship, and they're trying to figure out how they're going to help impact our community. And so that was supposed to be it didn't go through. It was supposed to be a news station on it. But really, I really want to get to the Q&A because I really want to talk about what we can do as educators and as people just in the community, the importance of kind of learning from our history and preserving it. But you think about it, there is not a museum here for Mexican American studies. And I appreciate the Holocaust Museum having a section upstairs. I went this morning and I saw it. It was great. It kind of stopped in 2012 and it's starting to continue. So I really want to just share with the crowd that as teachers, as educators, our school, when I was principal at Trinity Garza High School, we were one of the first ones to bring Mexican American studies and African American studies and other people to get involved and begin to start having a discussion. It started occurring in it started across the district, but it doesn't. It's almost what you bring. I just want to share with everybody here. Please don't hold back your own history. Don't hold back your parents' history. Don't hold back your grandparents' histories. I think one of the first projects I did as a teacher, my first year was in 1999, is just ask the kids to do a family tree and talk about where they're coming from and how important they are. And I know they were only third graders, but it was so impactful for them to do oral histories with their family and to do an ethnography about what's going on. It's important that they bring their lived experiences into the classroom so they can have a stronger connection to their world. So so I just share that with all teachers. It's possible. It doesn't matter what subject. I just want to make sure I continue to talk about that. And please, I'm willing to take any question. I'll let you go through. Yes, go ahead.
I just wanted to add before we start with the questions, you talked about the importance of preserving that testimony. The Dallas Holocaust and Human Rights Museum launched a project when we opened this museum in 2019 to expand a human rights collection. And we have taken some testimony of Mexican American leaders, people sharing their experience, but we would love to expand that. And so if anyone has a relative that has history and would be interested in letting us record their testimony, we would be very proud to do that. And also, we've been working with the leaders that are working to form the Mexican American Museum, and we would be happy to share that testimony with that museum once it's up and running. So think about that. Okay, so let's see. What resources would you recommend for those that want to learn more about local Mexican American history?
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. And that was a great point. Also, just so you knew that So this was a Jewish community here, and that's what the Mexicans and the Jew and it was Poland Jewish community that was here in Little Mexico. They mixed a lot as they got together. So there's also some histories that occur there. I just wanted to share that was really part of when Little Mexico came through. It was really a mixed group with the initial Jewish community that was here in Dallas. But to answer your question, there's we have Google nowadays, right? But I would tell you, if you want to get to some deep history here in Dallas, there actually, I don't know if anybody can tell me what floor it's on, Albert. In the library, what floor is that, Albert? The 7th floor at the library, we've got a lot of real deep archives of some of this history that we have. There's also a showcase there. You can go to our website for the DeMa website. You can do, God has some information. There extra more some of that. And right now, I think we have an individual who's trying to put together a museum that, the Mexican American Museum of Texas, which we're really advocating for. I don't know if you have any ideas. I don't know if we have a mic over there. If you can provide some information for that too.
Oh, is that Gus? Hey, Gus. Hi, Juanita.
Oh, hey,
Good
Juanita.
to see you too.
Can't see you. It's a little dark.
Yeah, maybe, you know what? Why don't we answer some more questions, and why don't you two come up and talk for just a minute about your plans for that museum? Do you mind?
That's fine.
Come on,
Sounds
Gus.
good.
I know
Come
you're
on,
not
Gus.
shy.
You knew it was going to happen.
Yeah.
You wore the suit to be camouflage, but it didn't quite work. It didn't quite work.
We're also, while Gus is coming up, have been talking with him and Juanita about trying to help us find an exhibition for our special exhibition space about Mexican American history. And so all of you that are attending today, as you go out and travel, if you find any traveling exhibitions, please contact us, because we definitely want to have a special exhibition that focuses on Mexican American or Hispanic history. Come over.
Greetings, Mary Pat, thank you very much. She was one of our first advocates. When we first started the museum, which was in June of 2022, it was a group of 8 different community leaders that decided that, we realized that there's no one place in Texas, of all places, that captures the broad spectrum of the Mexican American experience, from its indigenous roots through its Spanish, Tejano, and now Texan and Mexican American roots. There are several places around the state that are small silos, but there's no one place. So our objective is to really capture all that information from the 9 different cultural regions that we've designated in Texas and put it under one roof. So to your point, Macario, that someone who is not familiar with either their history or an Anglo group that wants to learn about the Mexican American history, they can go to one place and really see the whole spectrum of what it means to be Mexican American in Texas. So we're very happy and pleased and proud to be able to start that process. And as I mentioned, one of the first people we met with was Mary Pat, because they did a wonderful, there's efforts, and the museum is an example that we would like to follow. So we wanted to learn from the pros.
Thank you. And I'll just speak for you. You need a lot of artifacts in museums and testimony. So if you are in the audience and you have artifacts, you could share them with us, but you probably should share them with Gus. So be thinking about that too.
Definitely don't show up at our doorstep with the stuff, but look in your archives. I was recently in San Antonio, and I met a wonderful person there who is a literary titan here in Texas. And he mentioned that he has a couple of boxes in his closet. And I'm like, I want to get to those. So we feel that although there are items in museums currently right now, the real soul of the Mexican American experience probably lives in a lot of our closets. So I would encourage people to kind of look at your history. And as Macario mentioned, we are here because of our ancestors. And we are products of the past. And if you don't study and understand the past, you really don't understand the present. So I would encourage people to do that. And you might have some really cool stuff that we would be interested in. We can't accept anything yet, but we can definitely accept commitments from people.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you.
And talking about history, I do want to recognize kind of the godfather of bilingual education of North Texas, Dr. Rudy Rodriguez, because if you could stand, please, because he really champions bilingual education in this entire area, and he mentored my sister and myself to get into this field of education. But I want to share that because even today, everybody standing here, we all have a piece of history that we have to really preserve, even with ourselves. No matter your background, it really does matter. It's important that you do try to preserve that.
That actually, introducing him is a good lead into this next question. Before I ask it, if you have questions, don't forget to raise your note cards and our staff will come by and pick them up. What strides are being taken to better support Hispanic immigrant students in North Texas today?
That's a great question. I think, we actually have a deep history also of advocacy. Dallas College, which I'm real proud to wear this because they gave me the first opportunity to get into higher ed, even myself as a student. But they were actually the first one in 1998. They had the discussion, and in 1999, they provided the first ability for students, immigrant students, even undocumented students, to go to college at in-state tuition. And then all the other states followed other than the Noriega bills, the advocacy of Deanna Flores, who started it here. So we do have a history of advocating for immigrants here in Dallas. And that's when we talk about that Noriega bill, it started right here from the Dallas Community College, or it was Dallas College today, in those days, Dallas County Community College. So what we're doing now, especially now, we have what they call the DACA did make a difference, but we also have Dreamer scholarships that are occurring for those students. Y'all be surprised. We're real close to a bipartisan kind of decision. I think that's happening. I was in Washington D.C. Just this last. It was November. No, it was December. I was in Washington D.C. early December with a group of students from UNT Dallas, and also working with an organization that we're having some serious discussions of the need. It's kind of look historically, if you think of the Braceros program, there's a huge need for the workplace and the marketplace. So there's actually governors that on both sides of the aisle that really see the importance of thinking about what can we do differently to support immigrants so they can to get a pathway to citizenship. So, but I think for us, the education system, we know they're allowed, but DACA is going to be real important, and also finding ways for people to get involved. My valedictorian, who went to SMU on a full ride, he started his own business because he couldn't get something because of his status. LLCs is ways for them to work in the workplace. We've even found at UNT Dallas to give stipends and scholarships for students that may not be able to get there. So there are new resources, but I'm more excited about what can happen policy-wise with the bipartisan support on both sides of the aisle. It's just knowing the importance of how important our immigrant population is to our economy and, of course, to our education system.
Absolutely. We get past the negative rhetoric and get to results that will make a difference. Could you talk more about the new Mexican-American Studies course for public schools and what all the course covers? And are there any public lesson plans available on this history?
Yeah, I mean, even there are. I think there are the sequencing. Somebody can help. I know there's a sequencing map. Most school districts will have something. There's some that they already have them because they're part of the standards. But I will tell you, and this is what I share with anybody who teaches those courses. There is also room, no matter where you teach, because I know we have a few regions here, right? It doesn't matter what city. Whatever you're teaching, I really highly suggest to do what we kind of did a little bit today, and talk about what's happening locally, historically, and you can do mini lessons. You can try to incorporate those lessons to what you're doing already, because it's going to be more of a broader sense in Mexican American studies. But I think it's real important for the students in your classroom to see kind of their local history and find out how do Latinos or Mexican Americans or that community impact that particular community you're teaching in. I think that would be powerful. Even if it's not that many, let's go out there and find out what they are. And you'll find out that to make that connection with them so they can be part of history outside the classroom. I think that would be something that I highly suggest. While there's a set curriculum and there might be something that's in the books, I think there's really an opportunity to do what we did today and talk a little deeper.
Well, along those lines, the next question asks, who are some of your favorite historical figures that fought for the rights of Mexican Americans in Dallas? So who should they start with?
Well, that's a great question. We talked about a few of them today. Adelfa Callejo would be one. I would, I bring my own father, Juan Hernandez. He was a big advocate in the community. But if you look at, there's people that, if you look historically, they call the Big 12. Trini Garza, who's the namesake of the high school that I was at. I think he would be a big one. He just passed away just within this year. I mean, just an amazing advocate. He was my big mentor of mine. He made a big impact in my life. And so, to be, and just here, I also, to answer that question, and I just want to answer, is that there's people in this room here that I think that we all kind of have a responsibility and kind of hold ourselves accountable to create new histories and create and advocate for our students and try to challenge our students to think critically about how society's forming and how we're working together. And now, I'll be very honest, I think that we really got to find ourselves to work together and not in these separate sides. We got to find a way to get together so that we can make some real policies happening. So if you think about Trini Garza, he was an example of that. And if you think about someone who's able to see both sides, but even like superintendents like Michael Hinojosa is a big advocate. So I like to look at the ones that are here today too, that are trying to make an impact in education. Our advocacy is so important that we find people that are always going to be a champion. I have so much respect for teachers. I really think they're really the pulse and the biggest asset of a campus. And so I think you're going to have the biggest impact in those students, and I think you can help shape the next leaders of our community.
You've spoken quite a bit about this intergenerational connection and the importance of learning family history. What are some steps we can all take to ensure our individual family histories aren't lost?
Yeah, I'm going to sound a little bit like a broken record, but I really think that we need to take advantage of our technology. We're doing it with our organization, with the mall, and trying to preserve the history of as many people that have I'm guilty of it too. I have an 87-year-old aunt and an 85-year-old aunt who are just as smart as you can imagine. And I need to also hold myself accountable. And I did get some recordings, but I could even do better. I only did one on each. I got to do more. And so I just think we need to find the time. And look, let's activate the youth. Teachers, we can get the students to go do it if it becomes an assignment, right? Then they have to do it, right? If they have to go interview their parents or grandparents, it becomes an assignment. But I'm just saying we need to really find a way to continue to do this kind of work. I'll be honest with you. Even I myself have to continue to remind myself that we need to take advantage of the technology today to record those histories so that you can preserve them. I promise you, the great-great-grandchildren they're really gonna take it to the next level with their technology. But we have to give them a platform so they can find a way to preserve our history.
Could you share more about what we know about how early Mexican-American settlers interacted with the other residents in Dallas at the turn of the century, especially regarding potential language barriers between Spanish speakers and English speakers?
Yeah, I would tell you, just listening to my father's stories and my grandfather, I would say that there was a huge connection with the Jewish community, the Polish Jewish community that was here. And one thing that they both had in common was business. So they kind of spoke about the business language, and it's a really funny story. They'll tell you stories of if you go to a Mexican business and the Jewish business are real close together. It's like there was these strategies. It was like they knew how to talk to each other based on their own cultures, kind of what we talk about today. I think everybody's culture is important, that we express it every day, but they use their own background to connect to them. There's one thing that was so common with the two communities is their values, what they stood for, just the belief and the faith that they had in themselves. There was actually a strong connection together. But business was always a funny conversation because they were real similar in that, where there would be one little kid saying that, it's this one story I have to share. My father said, there would be like, the owner would be back here, and then the son would go, as a kid, would say, those are 5 for 10 cents. And then the owner said, what are you doing? That's 2 for 10. And so it was just a way, that was a funny story. That was all a setup. They still bought it for $5.10 because the kid said it, but the kid is learning business, the dad's learning business. It's all part of, that's the kind of conversations that you hear and the little stories you hear about, how we all still, it's part of the business language, and they would just laugh about it together and say that was a good move.
Is there a book you could recommend that discusses all of the things featured in today's presentation?
No, I think we're still writing it.
Okay, all right.
But there are a few foundation books.
There's an opportunity for someone in the audience,
that'd be
right?
good.
How can Dallas better remember and memorialize Santos Rodriguez?
I honestly think that it should be I'm advocating for it to be part of the curriculum for teachers to share, even if it's just a lesson. I think everybody in the city should know about Santos Rodriguez. It has to be part of the curriculum. I think we got to find a way to really continue to educate everybody. We go back to it. You know, my own kids, we march together today and watch the area, but I think we need to find a way to integrate it and incorporate it into our curriculum, because those are the kind of histories that we can't forget. It's so powerful then as it is today. We got to be careful that our history doesn't repeat itself if we don't learn from what's already happened.
Absolutely. It's part of the interactive in our Pivot to America gallery, also about Mexican American rights. So you can, all of the students that come through the museum are hopefully learning about it there. Many of the neighborhoods centered around industries and jobs. What are the occupations of many of the residents in Little Mexico? So this is saying, like the cement area, the cement elementary, that many of the neighborhoods centered around industry and jobs. So were there particular industries that most of the Mexican Americans worked in who lived in Little Mexico?
Yeah, you know, it was, you know, historically, if you look at the way Latinos, even if you look historically of how we, you know, we're always had a hard work ethic. And so for us, a lot of the area was manufacturing, a lot of the area was, especially in those times, with the trains, working the trains. It was to the point, in those days, there was not a lot of running water. We met the needs that we did, historically, we do the jobs that other people do not want to do. If you think about during World War II, the Bustling, we got 4.6 million. Now I'm using the data from the Holocaust Museum. Look at that. So that was just upstairs if you want to read more about it, up on the third floor. 4.6 million brasileños were brought in from Mexico, you know, to support while we were in World War II. No one talks too much about that. Like, what would have happened to the United States if we could not sustain our economy, our infrastructure, while we were fighting a war across the seas? And then what happens afterwards, you know, 10 years after that, we have Operation Wetback, which is we literally send back 1.6 million back out. Families in their house just having dinner get sent back by immigration. So we have a sad history of utilizing Mexicans to help us, and then we end up creating policies that and so it alienates them. So we got to kind of move away from that and take advantage. That's why I'm excited about some of the bipartisan conversations that are happening now. Hopefully we can change that kind of trend in history, and we can do a paradigm shift to do something different, because at the end of the day, we need people. We need to, in order for us to sustain our economy, the Latino community plays a huge role in that, and it's been historical. So it's no different than what's happened in the past. It's a long answer to a short question.
Well, thank you. I have a message from Gus, who wanted me to share that that Hogar de Dallas, or the Hispanic Organization for Genealogy and Research, is having a conference October 4th and 5th in Dallas with speakers on this topic, along with other ethnic studies topics. So we encourage you to check that out. And as long as we're making public service announcements, I'll give a pitch for Spanish-speaking volunteers at the museum. One of our wonderful docents, Gina Weber, Gina, wave your hand, is in the audience, and she frequently gives docent-led tours in Spanish. And when we have programs, like had free, the museum was open on Juneteenth for free, then was free to the public, and Gina was here doing tours in Spanish. And so we definitely need more volunteers here, and would love to get you all engaged with the museum. Okay, so one final question for you, Dr. Hernandez. What message would you like to send to Mexican American students in the audience today as they prepare for another school year? And what would you like to say to educators that are teaching this history?
That's a great question. One thing I would share to the youth is that please never forget where you come from. Engage with your parents, engage and take in as you go visit. If you go visit Mexico, you got to take it all in. You should be very proud to have that. You should be proud of your history. You should be proud of your culture. You should be proud of your language. There's nothing to ever be ashamed of. Those are all assets. It's a lot of wealth involved in that. So I would tell you, of course, I'm going to give you a homework assignment. If you haven't recorded your mom's story, your dad's story, that's your homework assignment. You have to get to your grandparents, same too. Y'all got to, summer's not over. You can still make another trip. If you got to go all the way to Mexico to record somebody, you need to do it. You can do it via Zoom. You probably heard me say this to this presentation because I'm going to tell you, it breaks my heart. You know, we had a bit of a fire in my house, so I lost a lot of these pictures. These are only a few that were left, right, a long time ago. If I had done recordings of my grandfather, I would have never lost that. And so please, I tell you, you young generation know technology better than anybody else. And so please teach us so we can learn from you, because I believe that you have a lot to share. And for the educators, I say the same thing, right? You know, I think you should be vulnerable. I think you should share your story, no matter what your background is. Share your story. Show those pictures. You know, no matter where you were, show those kid pictures and what you did and how you grew up and how you were shaped, so that the kids in your classroom can do the same thing. I think you could do it in every particular subject. There's always space for that, you know, especially after testing, right? You know, you got those days. Instead of pulling up that movie, let's go ahead and pull up another. Let's just do a little history shape, right? Even though, you know, I'm just saying, those kids need a break, right? They need a break. Let's have fun with it. Let's have fun with it during those downtimes. Let's have fun with it and really try to see if they can reach deep into their history so they can preserve it. And please utilize the technology. Put it in the cloud so it never goes away.
Yeah. Well, I think the teachers who are with us today are into history, so I'm sure that they all are doing things like that. But good, very good advice. Thank you so much for being with us, Dr. Hernandez, for sharing this important history. Thank you all for